Before I started this review, I thought I would introduce myself since I normally don't review movies that have nothing to do with the horror genre. Online, my friends know me as the Michael Myers fanatic because I mostly do videos and vlogs that have to do with the fictional serial killer from the Halloween franchise. But today or tonight, depending on where you live, I thought I would do something a little bit different. I wanted to review the 1985 adaptation of the 1908 Lucy Montgomery novel, Anne of Green Gables. In the 1985 version, it stars Megan Follows as Anne Shirley, and she's basically a 13-year-old orphan girl who happens to come from an asylum. We don't really know much about her parents, Walter and Bertha Shirley, I believe their names were. She's very imaginative. She dreams of being other people because at first she's not comfortable with who she is. The movie opens up with her reading a novel entitled Lady of Shalott, and she's just randomly walking around the woods and prancing around the woods, and then the lady that she's staying with calls her into the house to tend to the needs of the children. At that point, she becomes very angry and throws one of the novels into the fire. And I believe the lady's name was Mrs. Hammond, and she was played by Jane Eastwood. I really enjoyed this film, and I'm gonna tell you right now, this is not me sucking up to the Green Gables community. When I tell you guys this, I literally mean it. I would prefer this over a horror movie any day, even Halloween. And that's the truth, because this movie is clean. It has good moral values in it, great acting. Megan did an excellent job. Megan, if you're listening, you did an excellent job as Anne Shirley. Colleen Dewhurst, she's passed away in 1991. She did an excellent job as Marilla Cuthbert. Richard Farnsworth as Matthew Cuthbert, he passed away in 2000. He did an excellent job. Rest in peace to them. But getting back to what I was saying, during that time, to be an orphan child was something of low class. That's the way they portrayed it in this movie. I could be wrong, but that's the feeling I'm getting. It's like if you're an orphan, well, you can't be of any value to the social status. But like I said, Mrs. Hammond gets angry and she burns the books, or book. I don't remember whether it was one or two, but she burns it nonetheless. And Anne gets angry. She's dropped off at this orphanage. And Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert are brother and sister. I thought I should point that out, because when I saw this movie the first time in the 90s, I thought they were married. But Marilla decides that she wants a boy, and that she wants the boy to be 11 or 12, so they can be old enough to do their chores but young enough to be raised. But her friend Rachel Lynde advises against it, and Rachel Lynde was played by Patricia Hamilton. But as I was saying, Rachel Lynde is basically this outspoken elderly woman. When Anne arrives at Green Gables, she meets up with Matthew Cuthbert, and she basically talks his head off. I watched the film, and even I was getting annoyed. I'm like, is this girl gonna shut up? She just doesn't come up for air. And I love the character, but one of the things that annoys me about the character is that she's too imaginative. You know, she never could accept things as they normally were or as they really were. She always had to imagine them some other way. This film takes place in the late 1800s in Canada on Prince Edward Island. I wanted to point out whether or not Green Gables is an actual location. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. She meets Gilbert Blythe, and I want to point this out, that she begs the Cuthberts to keep her because she says that she's never belonged to anybody before and she just wants to belong. This movie is basically about a girl trying to find her way in this world. She doesn't have any friends, which is why she had to create this imaginary friend named Katie, I believe it was, and Katie was just a reflection of Anne, which was in the window. That was kind of spooky to have a window friend. But when she gets to Marilla's house, Marilla makes her drop all that nonsense. And Marilla points out the fact that Anne is a heathen, because she doesn't believe in God. And if she did, she said that at one time when she did believe in God, he turned her hair red. And she never cared for him since. But there you have it nonetheless. And Marilla agrees to keep her for one night, but then she wants to take her back because she didn't want a girl in the first place. She wanted a boy. And as I told you earlier, Rachel Lynde advised against it because she said that asylum children were crazy. Remember, Anne came from an asylum. And Rachel Lynde starts telling Marilla all these stories about how this asylum child set the family on fire, and the other asylum child poisoned the family with strychnine. I can understand her reservations because I'm gonna be quite honest with you guys. If I had to adopt someone and I found out that they came from an asylum, I don't think I'd want them either. And it's no offense to anyone that's ever been in one, it's just that that kind of thing brings on apprehension, and rightfully so, at least in my opinion. But she agrees to keep her for the night, as I pointed out. But when she tries to take her back the next day, they don't want to take her back. So this lady named Mrs. Blewett agrees to take her, but she tells her, "You'll do your chores and I expect you to behave yourself," and that sort of thing. But Marilla thinks that Mrs. Blewett is too strict, I guess. So she agrees to keep her on a trial basis. She puts her in school, and then that's when Anne meets Gilbert Blythe, who's portrayed by Jonathan Crombie or Crombie, I don't know how he pronounces it. And Gilbert likes Anne right away, but he can't let her know that. So he starts taunting her, calling her carrots and pulling her hair. She becomes angry and takes a slate and smashes it over his head. And after this, the teacher makes her write on the blackboard that Anne Shirley has a very bad temper. And she has to write it 100 times. I don't think I could do that. As the movie goes on, Diana Barry, who is played by Schuler Grant, I guess that's how you pronounce it, or Schuyler or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm sure you guys will correct me. Diana Barry becomes her bosom friend, as they call it. They meet at a picnic. I believe it's a church picnic. Anne gets herself into all kinds of trouble, physical trouble, because Diana tells Anne a story about a place in the woods being haunted and challenges her to go in that woods, in the haunted place. And Anne ends up spraining her ankle, her other ankle, but actually I skipped ahead because I forgot to mention that someone dares her to walk the ridge pole of a roof and she falls off of it. I still don't get that because I wouldn't walk on anybody's roof, but whatever. Marilla has to go into town for some reason. I don't really remember what the reason was. It was a 4-hour movie. But she has to leave. And she leaves Anne there by herself. And she tells Anne, you know, be careful, behave yourself. Anne invites Diana over. And she accidentally gets Diana drunk. Because they drink this drink that is called raspberry cordial. I don't know exactly what that is, but unfortunately that's not what they were drinking. They were drinking currant wine, or at least Diana was. She gets drunk, she throws up. From this point on, Diana's mom forbids Anne to see Diana again. As I said, this is a good movie, but I can't spend a lot of time discussing it. So, a long story short, we meet Miss Stacy, who becomes the new teacher because the old one was dismissed. And she's played by Marilyn Lightstone. She can also be found in the sequel, which I will review next. Miss Stacy catches Anne reading a novel during class, and she confiscates the novel, and she starts teaching Anne, tomorrow is always fresh, but then Anne takes it and spins the phrase her own way and says, tomorrow is always fresh with no mistakes in it. And then Miss Stacy comes to the house to tell Marilla that Anne is doing well in school. So Marilla invites Miss Stacy to stay for dinner. And of course, we end up seeing that a mouse is in the plum sauce. And everyone laughs. I don't see how that's funny, because the dessert was ruined. Matthew Cuthbert is the one that takes Anne's side, while Marilla is the more strict parent. He buys her a dress with puff sleeves to go to a Christmas ball. Anne is holding a grudge against Gilbert Blythe and doesn't forgive him for about 3 years. How someone can hold a grudge that long, I don't know, but there it is. After a while, Diana's mom decides to forgive Anne because Anne ended up saving Diana's sister's life. At least I think that's the sister. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. We end up meeting Diana's aunt, Josephine Barry, and she's played by Charmian King. I guess that's how you pronounce it. Now they race upstairs and they jump on Aunt Josephine. And I can understand her being angry at that. She's going to tell what happened, but then after Anne pleads their case, she decides not to do it on the condition that Anne agrees to come and stay with her. Of course, Anne does this, and she decides not to send the letter after all. As we approach the end of the movie, Matthew Cuthbert dies, suffering a heart attack because he was trying to pull the cows to some destination. I'm not really sure where. At that point, Marilla decides that she can't live at Green Gables by herself, so she goes to live with Rachel Lynde, and we find out that Anne has been accepted into a college. She decides not to take the offer because she wants to stay with Marilla, and Gilbert goes in her place, if I'm not mistaken. She eventually forgives Gilbert because Marilla tells her a story that she once held a grudge against Gilbert's father. They become friends, and the movie's basically over. I thought it was a great film. I didn't want it to go off. Sorry I had to rush through it, but I don't have a lot of time. It's been a pleasure reviewing it for you. I really liked how Anne had no boundaries in her life. As far as she was concerned, she could go anywhere, she could do anything, she could be anything. And I just want to say this before I go. We also must be like Anne in believing that we can go anywhere, we can do anything as long as we put our minds to it. And it's been my pleasure reviewing the 1985 film Anne of Green Gables, starring Megan Follows as Anne Shirley, Colleen Dewhurst as Marilla Cuthbert, Richard Farnsworth as Matthew Cuthbert, Patricia Hamilton as Rachel Lynde, Marilyn Lightstone as Miss Stacy, Shulier Grant as Diana Barry, and Jonathan Crombie as Gilbert Blythe. This was a great film, and I cannot wait to review Anne of Green Gables, the sequel, and all the other sequels, including Anne of Green Gables, A New Beginning. I believe that this film was released on December 5th, 1985 in Canada. In the US, it was released on February 17th, 1986. It aired on CBC. I'm the Michael Myers fanatic, and I approve this message. This has been Anne of Green Gables.